Okay, college, other market that has exploded in price over the past 30 or so years. So essentially the problem in the college market is the same problem that plagues the housing market. However, the difference is going to be, at least in my opinion, the solution to the housing market problems are much simpler than the solution to the college problems, the tuition problems, or at least readily apparent. You know, in the housing case, get rid of zoning, let people do what they want to do with their property. If you buy a house, you can turn it into an apartment complex. Essentially, what we've done with our housing policy is we've turned, private property into public property, where you essentially have to, the decision has to be made at the city level or at the community level as to what you could do with your property. You're not allowed to build apartment complexes on it, even if you own the land. In fact, it's very hard to even do, minor alterations sometimes, depending on the neighborhood. So, in my opinion, the solution to the housing market unaffordability issues is fairly straightforward. On the college side, it's much more difficult. However, the problem is the same problem. Rising demand coupled with inelastic supply. Again, what does that mean? So we have people rushing in to the college market wanting to go to college. That's demand. Demand's being pushed up. We have a fixed supply. Again, there's only a fixed number of good colleges, and those colleges are not expanding their enrollments, at least not expanding them significantly. So essentially, it's the same problem. You got fixed number of spots for a growing number of people. If the quantity can't adjust, the price must adjust. All right. So on the demand side, we have foreign students, college wage premium, government subsidies. We'll go into these in detail. The supply side, we have the difficulties in expanding the number of institutions and enrollment, public funding cuts, and abominable cost disease, which sounds scary and is actually fairly complex. So it is actually a complex idea, real subtle idea, and pretty important, probably, idea. Okay, so increased intuition. We're all familiar with this. Where's the stats? Here's some of the stats I pulled, but very expensive. I have a friend who he was like 100 grand in debt from his college experience, which were one of these like for-profit like film schools, Full Sail. A lot of these will have really, really high debt burdens. I know a couple of people who have really, really high debt burdens from Full Sail in particular, these private colleges. He actually was so in debt, he had to turn to card counting. So he taught himself card counting, and actually traveled around the country in a van going from casino to casino, like local non-Vegas type casinos where they're not as they're not as stringent on the card counting. He made like I don't know, a few $100 grand. Was able to pay back his student loans and put a bunch of money in the bank. And I don't think he's worked for like a year. He's just been out here in LA, writing, trying to be a writer. So card counting, not a solution on here, but worked for my buddy Clayton. All right. So demand factors. What is pushing up the demand for college? So one thing is we have massively expanded the subsidies to college, primarily in terms of loans, although there is some just straight grants, and low interest rates. So the history of this is we start with the GI Bill, which provides college funding for veterans. Now, it should be noted I don't want to pick on the institution too much. I don't know about it, not that much about it, but there were the Full Sails of their day. In 1944, actually, I think 1/3 of this funding went to, kind of fly-by-night colleges that popped up to take advantage of this extra money that was made available by the government to veterans for college. Schemes, scams, maybe that's too strong of a word, but it existed all the way back in 1944, the good old days, as my grandma would call them. Not so, grandma. Anyways. And then we have this National Defense Education Act, where we get the first student loans in 1958 as a response to the Russians beating us to space. That's very interesting as well. The Yuri Gagarin Sputnik stuff, if you ever look into it. Probably, well, I don't want to get into it. All right. So we got scholarships and work study abroad. Work study added in the 65. We get the Pell Grants, which covered 90% back in the day. I believe they only cover 20% on average now. We get the loans. The loans are extended to for-profit colleges in 1972, not just nonprofits. The limits on the subsidized Stafford loans are increased and then increased again. And then basically since the 2000s, we've had really low interest rates, which is sort of a subsidy. It makes it easier to get loans or less costly to get loans. So this is just a giant pool of money that's been going, that are available to students in the form of these loans and subsidies. Now, one of the most important ideas in economics is that taxes and subsidies, they're borne by both parties affected by them. So, you go to the Starbucks, you buy a cup of coffee, they add the tax, you may think, I'm paying the tax. You're not paying the tax. Both Starbucks and you are paying the tax. If there was no tax, Starbucks would charge a slightly higher price, probably. And so in that sense, both of you are paying the tax. In this case, we have a subsidy, and this happens, this is a fact. If there's a tax, both parties will be affected by it, both buyers and sellers. If there's a subsidy, the same thing is going to happen. So you may think this money is going to students. So we have all these subsidies, all these loans, and all these grants. It's all going to the students, right? Well, this is also going to the colleges, because the colleges, even though the money is going to the students, the colleges know that. They're not dumb. The colleges know that. They say, these students have access to higher money, so we can increase our tuition. They'll be able to afford it. All right. Here's just to give you an overview. We got 1.5 trillion in student debt, 44 million borrowers. I'm still among these. You don't want to know how old I am. Still paying off my student loans. That's probably because I went to grad school though, forever. It's not like I had pretty significant student loan debt actually, given how long ago it was. So this is essentially direct from the government. So some of this money comes directly from the government, or it's government backed. Either way is essentially, you can look at it as a subsidy. There's often, one of the problems with these loans is often little disclosure. So you don't really know what you're getting into. You don't know what the repayment terms are. You don't know what your monthly payment is going to be after you graduate. So there's not a lot of transparency here. So again, this is like a market failure. Usually what you want in order for a market to work well, everybody has to know what's going on. If I'm buying, these figs over here, I need to know, okay, these are good figs. They are delicious figs, by the way. Whole Foods, baby. And so if you're buying a car, you need to know the details of the car. Both parties need to have information in order for it to be a functioning market. So this is an example of what we call asymmetric information, where oftentimes the borrower does not know what he's getting into. If Clayton knew that he'd have to live in a van for a year, going from podunk casino to podunk casino, card counting to pay back his student loans, would he have taken those loans? Probably. I think it was a pretty exciting year, but still, he didn't know what he was getting into. Now, these loans are also very difficult to get rid of in bankruptcy. So oftentimes they will stick with you through a bankruptcy. And the government actually makes a lot of money. One estimate is they'll make 185 billion over the next 10 years. So we got this giant pool of money going to students. That's going to raise tuition, or universities are essentially going to respond to that by increasing tuition. Okay, skill bias, technological change. We'll talk a lot about this in the inequality lecture. What's happening is the return on a college degree is increasing. So even though the tuition's going up, it's still a good deal. But it's still a good deal if you go to a top 100 institution, or if you go to like a lesser institution but major in a highly paid field. So why is it still a good investment? Because the difference between a high school diploma and a college degree in terms of earnings is just growing. Okay, this gap is growing. Actually, interestingly enough, the gap between majors is also growing. And the gap between majors within a college is actually higher than the gap between college and high school. But this isn't about what you should major in or the return on majors. This is about skill bias, technological change, which is, in this case, we're talking about the difference between a college degree and a high school diploma. So the difference is huge. So, now most people, if they want a decent job, you need to go to college. So again, that's increasing. So we've increasing the pool of money available to students. That's going to make more people want to college. We are The return on college is increasing. That's going to increase the number of people going to college. And in terms of the student pool has also widened as we have the development of many other countries. As other countries industrialize, get richer, all of a sudden there's a bigger pool of foreign students that now would like to come to the US or can afford to come to college in the US. So here you have the share of US enrollment that are foreign students, and you can see these numbers exploding. Again, not saying this is a bad thing or a good thing, just this is a trend. And so all of these three things is essentially increasing the pool of US students, increasing the number of people who want to get into those institutions, those US institutions. That all of that's going to push up price. If you got a bigger pool, you know you can increase your price, and still people will want to come to your university. So that's on the demand side. We're going to go to the supply side next. I'm actually going to magically transport somewhere else for the supply side lecture. I already recorded it. I already recorded this lecture, but the computer was messed up. So this is the second time through. Maybe it's better, or hopefully it's better.